Welcome to the Community ROI podcast. Here, senior community experts, founders, and C-level managers tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about how a community impacts business growth. By listening to these conversations, you'll get actionable steps on how to connect community goals with business goals to skyrocket business growth while still bringing extreme value to community members. My name is Yurii. I help people and brands shine through communities and personal connections. And my guest is Joshua Zerkel, a community-led growth and engagement leader with can you imagine that, over 20 years of experience with everything around community, designing, building, scaling, transforming community programs for all kinds of organizations, nonprofit, B2B, B2C, B2C2B, R2D2. Oh, not it's from another movie. And also an author of the Community Code Substack and book, who truly believes that community isn't just vibes, it's go-to-market. And I would even add it's go-to-hearts strategy. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you so much.
As we've just said before the recording, it's so weird that for all these years we've never met. And I'm super happy to meet you. I'm super happy to talk to you with such a huge amount of experience. So I will ask you everything, like everything literally I can only fit in this conversation. So let's start
Ask me everything.
Let's start with the easiest question. So what's your definition of a community for business?
Simply put, it's relationships at scale. I think it's the way to create connections between a business, its customers, and each other. But importantly, it's not something that just happens. It's a system in a business context that the business designs and stewards. The company creates the conditions, participates early, sets the stage, and enables customers to create value for each other in ways that just are durable, that create both business results and personal results. The company builds the system, but the community creates the value.
Yeah. And what is your definition of a community goal?
A community goal in a business context, it's a goal that ladders up to something that's important to the business. But typically, it's a behavior change that you want to see in customers that directly or indirectly supports some sort of business outcome, whether that's faster time to value, faster time to close, better adoption, retention, advocacy, etc. I think in my experience, what I've seen is a lot of community builders, especially if they're newer, frame a community goal as increased posts or grow membership or have more attendees at events. Those are activity goals. Those are not what your community is there to achieve for the business. And so for me, one of the things that I think has served me well in my career is encouraging the people I work with to understand how community impacts real business results, not just activity metrics. In the world of community, it's really, really easy to focus on activity metrics. Like, look how many people attended my event, or look how many people are engaging in the forum. Those things are great. You need to do those things so that you have the business results. But no one else at your business is going to care about those things because they don't impact the things that matter to the business. And so real community goals focus on things that matter to the business.
It's usually you need some numbers because C-level management likes to talk numbers. And when you tell them, oh my God, there are 100 participants join this event, or there are like 1,000 posts, and nobody really cares about the value. They see just numbers and they don't know what's behind the number. So it's very easy to fall into this number game trap. And I'm curious from your experience, how to establish the right community goal in a way that it really helps business.
Actually, I think it's really easy. Ask people at your business what they're working on and what goals they have. And ideally, if you're in an organization, if you're in one that's organized in any way, typically they have like annual goals or quarterly goals. The job of the community builder is to ask themselves, here's what the business is trying to achieve. How can I help achieve that via community? Just like if you're in marketing, you ask, how do I help achieve that via marketing or via sales or whatever your role at a company is? I've often found community builders try to sidestep that issue of, well, the business is doing this, but we're doing this for the community. Like, why do you think you have a job? Like, you're not doing it for altruistic reasons. You may really like working with people and building community as part of that. And that's great because that is the work of community. But community, if you're doing it for a company, if I'm being really, crass about it, it's there to do one of two things, as all of us who work for a company are. You're either there to make the company money or save the company money. You need to be able to say, by community doing this, we've been able to make the money in this way or save the money in this way. And so when you're coming up with a goal, typically your business has already some established goals that it's trying to achieve. How does what you're doing via community, via all the amazing activities that we do as community builders, how do you connect the dots between what you're doing and how it's impacting these goals? If you can't do that, like if you can't explain really clearly how what you're working on helps sales, CS, product, whatever team you're trying to impact, if you can't explain how you're helping them win, you are not actually creating community goals. You're probably just creating community activities, which the activities ladder up to the goals impact the business. And so it's probably just an exercise of getting clear when you're coming up with a
No,
community goal.
it's like the funny, very funny that in English you have business and you have busyness. So
Yes.
sometimes you help to grow business and sometimes you create business, and it's like totally opposite different things, because it doesn't mean that if you are busy that it means something. And I feel
Yeah.
like that's a trap that many community builders are falling into, that it's so hard to prove community value, but no, you have to connect what you are doing with like tangible results. Usually it's money. And then in this case, it's not that hard to talk. And I feel like every community builder has to have some business education. I'm curious, do you have some business education?
I do, mostly through being in business for such a long time. But I have taken like formal business classes. I've run my own businesses. I understand how business works. And I think you're right. A lot of, and I love community builders. I've been one for a very long time. Like, don't get me wrong, community builders out there. I love you. Warm hug. And I've also noticed many community builders feel like the business side of things is somehow dirty. And
Yeah.
sorry, folks, like we're working in a society where we got to make money, and the business that we're working for has to make money so they can pay us and pay our team and help us build our programs. If you really truly feel like doing the business part of the work isn't for you, maybe work at a nonprofit or do community building like in your real life communities, not in a business community setting. Because if you're doing it in business, you're actually doing yourself, your community, and the company a disservice if you don't connect the dots between how what you're doing impacts the business. If you're trying to hide off on an island within your organization so that the business people don't see you and don't see what you're doing, honestly, I think you're thinking about it all wrong. Because it's the same group of customers that the business people are talking to and that the community people are talking to. You have to treat it as a cohesive whole. It's not like it's this thing that's off on the side. That's where you get into the space where people stop caring about community because it doesn't matter. In your organization,
Yeah.
if you're not connecting the dots, it doesn't matter. And that's the job of the community builder to fill that gap.
There are people who are hired to build internal communities, but when you are working with external community, you are still building internal community because you still need to connect all the people that you are working with, all the different teams. And I feel like some community builders are forgetting about it. And I think that they have to remember about it, that those are still communities that are working on.
I mean, these are
Yeah.
the most important people to your community. Your members are important, but even more important are your internal stakeholders, whether it's the leader that you ladder up to, the cross-functional team member that you need to ask for a favor from time to time, the teams that are going to participate in the community activities that you're doing, the ways that you're going to help these other stakeholders achieve their goals. You have to spend quite a bit of time doing internal roadshows and politicking. Sorry, folks, internal politics is part of the deal when you work at a company. And it's really just about spending the same amount of time and mental energy on building the internal relationships as you would building the relationships with your community members. They're both parts of your community if you are leading a community program. And you ignore the internal one at your own peril.
Yeah, yeah. Better don't do that. Better don't do that. So coming back to community goals. So I'm curious, what is one goal of the community you're working with at the moment or worked anytime before that inspires you the most?
To me, I think community, a sweet spot for community, especially in ones that I've built, is trying to set up the community in a way that we can help customers build confidence and feel really good about the product or service that we're building so that they can then, in turn, inspire, teach, and support each other at scale. Because no matter how large a company that I've worked at is, for instance, there's never going to be enough people inside the company to tell all of the stories that customers have, to show them all the use cases that they might think of, to help them with every question. And so I really think if we do community well, like one of the goals that I always have is how do we help people achieve increased adoption and retention and advocacy as compared to baseline customers? If our community can show that we're really helping people be successful through those measures, and the baseline customers are less successful, that's all the fuel that I need to help the rest of the organization help me get people into the community. And once they're in the community, they're helping each other be really successful. So for me, that notion of how do we help build confidence for our customers so that they can achieve all these other things is one of the core goals that I always try to work on. What can we do from the community side in combination with our partners on other stakeholder teams to help achieve this? Because especially if you're working at an organization that has a product or a service, no one knows it as well as you internally would. How can you help your customers get even a few extra pieces of that knowledge so that they can feel like insiders and feel like they know and feel confident?
How do you do that? I mean, like, what are some specific actions or maybe some programs that you run to reach that goal, to really help your customers feel very knowledgeable about the product that you are working with?
Yeah, I think this is where it's really a combination, the nexus really of customer community plus customer education and customer advocacy all mixed in. The customer only experiences the experience. They don't really care and shouldn't care about your org chart, like who's doing which piece of it. But when all these teams work together, you can create really effective customer education programs that involve not just here's a course, go take it, but community elements of sharing, inspiration. So, like just as an example, at Asana, we did so many events where we would help customers learn how to use the product. But that's boring to me. I think what's more interesting is that we would help people be inspired by what other community members were doing as part of the educational process. And so we would often encourage people to share their own use cases, ways that they were using the tool, and so on. Even when I was at Evernote, I mean, that was more B2C. And so the use cases were all over the map. And so getting people to showcase what they were doing and how they built it, and then follow that up with a technical, here's where you click to build that type of education, was really a great combination of leveraging the power of community and the power of customer education together to help build that confidence that is based on inspiration.
Yeah. So to help people be inspired, you have to first find those people who are creating these use cases. Then you have to ask them about this story, and then you have to share this story. So how do you start? How, when you are creating a use case for sharing the community, like where do you start?
So sometimes, if you're lucky, you're at a brand where people are already showing things online that they're creating. That's helpful because you then kind of have a catalog to choose from of like, oh, like Yuri's creating this really interesting stuff. Let's reach out to them and ask them, like, hey, would you be willing to share this more broadly, or would you be willing to share it as part of an educational moment or in the community? And sometimes you don't have that luxury. So that's when you have to do a bit more detective work. And maybe you rely on the data that you have internally at your company of looking at who's really using your product or your service. And then maybe you reach out to them and say, we're inspired by what you're doing. We'd love to learn more and potentially showcase your use case. So I think there's different ways to back into it. Whether the information is right out where you can see it on social media or on the back end in your reporting, you often can get insights into who's really leveraging your tool well, the ways that they're using it, and so on. Ideally, if you're smart, you can connect the dots between, hey, customer marketing and marketing in general is focusing on these use cases, these verticals, this particular set of features. And then you find people in the community who are doing those things so you can tell the story. When you tell that story, all of those other cross-functional marketing teams want to amplify that story because it slots really nicely into the narrative that they're already going for. So this is where, again, understanding what the business is trying to achieve can really serve you very well as a community builder. Because if all this work is already happening over here with your stakeholders, why not just help? Like get on the train because it's going to amplify the work that you're doing rather than do something completely different over here.
What's the difference between community use case and marketing created use case?
So, what's interesting is that the marketing created use case is typically more it's more of like a fantasy. It's like ideal customer would do this in this way and tell this story with this through line. Community is often messier, like, oh, we built this, here's how we got there. It's more reality oriented. And I think there's a place for both. On the marketing side, because I've worked in marketing for many years, I understand the need for this more idealized version, more glossy version, because that appeals to a large segment of the audience. That can be paired really nicely with a on the ground. This is an example from a real customer in a real place using the tool in this way. It helps create balance. And so I think the difference is one is glossy and one is more real, but it's not like one is better than the other. They're different. They do different things. And pairing them together is where the power is at.
And it also sounds like adding a little bit of vulnerability, like, yes, we are great, still we are not perfect, just like
Yeah.
everyone. So we are here for you no matter what. And for those who cannot connect creation of use cases to business goals, so how creating a community use case impacts business goals?
So when you have an array of community use cases that you can point to, especially when you start having enough of them, you start seeing patterns. That's when you can start reflecting that back to internal stakeholders, whether that's in product, sales, business, CS, wherever, and say, these are patterns that we're seeing in the community, whether it's use cases or maybe problems that they're running into. And then you feed that back into internal teams. Then they may be inspired to change their campaigns or their content or the part of the go-to-market motion that they're responsible for. So I think to your earlier point, having these community use cases, these more on the ground, reality based ones can add a sense of authenticity
Hmm.
to, here's the high level thing that we've been thinking of. Here's how it's actually playing out in the world. What elements can we pull from that into our broader campaigns or messaging, et cetera? And how to reflect what's happening in the real world. If you're at an organization that is open to that sort of thing, that can be a really powerful loop because it starts with this idealized version, comes around to people actually using it. How they use it may look a little bit different. That feedback goes back to those stakeholder teams and then they reflect that back into the loop. So when it works well, it can be really awesome. It can take some work to get it there because having been a marketer and worked with marketers for so many years, I think they have an idea of how things work, how people work, how messages are received, and sometimes it's beneficial to offer them a reality check based on this real customer said this real thing. And so it does take some internal nuance, but I found more often than not people are open to it.
How many use cases you have to get and to hear from real customers, like real use cases, to really go to, let's say, product team or marketing team and tell them, hey, there is a pattern.
More than a few, to be honest. I often found in the world of community, there's usually some loud voices, and you want to listen to the loud voices. You want to make sure that they feel heard and respected, but they're not always, sometimes they are, but often they're not representative of what most people's experience
Hmm.
is. And so I found that you need more than a few examples that feel representative, not necessarily statistically significant, because we're not working with quantitative data, we're working with qualitative information, but it needs to feel like this is something we're seeing again and again consistently in order for it to feel like I can bring this to another team in a way that they would understand and feel is resonant rather than, oh, it's this guy, he's always complaining about something, or, this is an interesting use case, but we only see it once. We need more than that. So I think part of the job of community leaders, community builders, is that pattern recognition of, okay, I see the one off. It's loud, it's bright, but it's not really representative. These ones that are quieter, but I'm seeing them over and over, this is actually more representative. And, in working with my own teams over the years, I've found, especially more junior community builders, really focus on the one really loud one. But that's
Yeah.
not actually, it matters to that person, but it's not the one that matters writ large. The ones that matter more broadly are the ones that are a little quieter. They're just bubbling under the surface, but there's enough of them that we should take notice. And having enough of those is really critical if you want to bring that to your stakeholder teams who can then take notice of it and hopefully action it in some way.
I also understand that all teams are usually busy. So it's not like they're waiting for you to come with ideas, what to improve, what to build, whatever. And there is this story about the boy who screamed, "Wolf, wolf," and then nobody believed him. So
Mhm.
I'm curious from a community builder perspective, what should you do? How should you present your findings to other teams so that not be this boy who screams wolf, but to really ensure that it's valuable and something needs to be taken action on?
It's difficult because if you do it too often, they're going to stop paying attention. One thing that I found to be useful is if you have a regular checkpoint with stakeholder teams rather than a one-off like emergency, like there's always room for emergencies when they happen. But if you have like a quarterly check-in or a monthly check-in or whatever the cadence that makes sense for your organization is, if you use community data to come to those quarterly check-ins and say, here's the patterns that we're noticing. We saw this one red alert. We brought this to you because it seemed critical at the time. Or here's a bunch of things that have been bubbling up that we want to just put on your radar. Do with them what you will, but here's what we're noticing. If you have these regular check-ins, that sort of stakeholder management piece of it doesn't have to be such a big deal.
Yeah.
Even if you meet, like, let's say you're in a product-focused community, meet with your product team once a quarter to say, hey, we're going to have a regular community check-in with product leadership just to share what we're noticing, what we're learning, what we're seeing, what people are saying, positive and less so, so that you have real on the ground customer level feedback. I found that most teams are open to this because these are insights that they typically wouldn't have on their own. What I've seen, especially working in Silicon Valley for so long, is that many times because of the data-oriented nature of how most organizations run, product teams, customer-facing teams, they really respond well to data, like preponderance of statistically significant data. What they don't typically have access to are customer voice level insights.
Mm.
And so if I can bring those to them via community in an aggregated way that still feels relevant, that's a piece of the insight puzzle that they're missing. And so humanizing the quantitative data with some very relevant qualitative information from the community can be really powerful. So when we're thinking about how do we bring community information to these teams who can then action them, hopefully, you have to have enough of them that it seems relevant, and you have to bring that to them in a way that feels, oh, I understand how this complements the data that I already have.
You named already so many teams. So at least I heard product team, customer facing team, marketing team. So from your over 20 years of experience, what are top three teams you usually work the most when building a community, and how does community impact them?
Yeah, this is one where it will depend by organization, but I would say generally, the ones that I've worked with most, well, I've typically sat on the marketing team in my community career. I've been fortunate to work usually directly under the CMO, and so I've been well connected to all the things that community can offer to marketing. Community is really in the marketing and go-to-market world, a credibility engine. It turns messaging, that more fantasy messaging, into real life customer proof. And so community can impact marketing via real life use cases and stories, examples of how people are using our product or our service in the real world. We can find real advocates that would talk about our product on the ground to their own networks. So really that built-in advocacy and network effect. So for marketing and go to market, that's usually my number one cross-functional stakeholder. But then moving on from there, I'd say the next is in the nexus of like sales and customer success. These are more teams that are working directly with customers, but in different ways. Oftentimes, community really works well when we're talking about what I mentioned in the beginning, which is helping customers be more successful, building their confidence. And so this is often the job of sales and customer success as well. So we can really help them by offering more scalable solutions for them. So they receive fewer repetitive questions from customers by directing them towards community. Their own customers for a CSM, they're juggling a book of accounts. Maybe we can help their customers be part of the community so that they can be better informed, better educated, ask deeper questions when they actually talk with their CSM. And additionally, for sales and for CS both, there's a lot of activity that happens under the hood within community, whether people are attending events or participating in forum discussions or taking courses. These are things that if I'm a customer facing member of the team, sales or CS, I want to know about because those show intent. And when there's intent happening, that's an opportunity for a cross sell, an upsell, a product upgrade. These are things that CS wants to know about, and so does sales. And so those are ways that we can work directly between community and those teams. And then the third is, I think, often ignored by community, but I don't know why. Product. This is the thing that all of our customers are coming to our community for because they're excited about. So we, as community builders, should work directly with those teams as much as possible because community offers more than just, feedback on the product. They can get context about why and how this thing is being used and bigger picture issues that surround it. Because in community, well, even without asking, people tell us. They tell us how they're actually using a product or service. We can spot patterns of use or disuse early. We can see how product features are landing before and after a launch. And we can help product test ideas, even things like messaging for a new feature before it even goes out to the general public. And so for community teams that aren't connecting the dots directly with product teams, what a miss. Because we have the people who care about the thing. These are the people that are making the thing. Like, let's connect that together. It's really powerful.
To your point about customer success, I remember it was Ashley Gallman Williams who told some time ago in a previous Community ROI episode that your customer success is your business success, and it's something that people are forgetting about. So they are focusing on like growing business, etc., and then like forgetting customers in this journey. But like if you focus on
Yeah.
customers, if you do everything for them to be successful, that's how you grow. That's how you're getting success. And you know something that I personally dealt with and still dealing from time to time, and I hear a lot about from folks in the community world, that community it's a long-term game. So you won't have overnight success. You won't have like immediate ROI. So how to get leadership on board and invested when community is this long-term game?
This is more difficult than it should be, in my opinion. I think a lot of, I can only speak for the Silicon Valley world. Like we are invested in short-term results here. Like that is the nature of what most tech companies work on, how they function, and so on. And so the concept of long term is very, very difficult for most leaders to wrap their heads around. Oftentimes I do advising work as well, and I've spoken with founders who come to me and they say, I want to build a community. I want to see results in 90 days. And I have to tell them, if that's what you want, community may not be the strategy for you because the reality is, anytime you've tried to build relationships with anyone, one, you can't force it. Two, you can't speed it up. And three, you have to be patient because we're dealing with real life people here. You may see numbers on an engagement dashboard, but underneath those numbers are real life humans. And building relationships with people takes time. The nice thing about it taking time is that there's trust, there's authenticity that gets built into that process. And at the end of that cycle, you have something that is enduring. However, it takes time to get there. And so when I talk with teams who are thinking of putting together community programs, an important question for them to ask themselves is, do they have the appetite to take something that works in parallel to all their other short-term measures and build something long-term that helps support all of them? And so for us to talk to leaders and have them understand that community's ROI is long term, leadership really has to be bought into the long term notion. If they're not, to be honest, community may not make sense at the organization because it will never be set up to be successful. There are many short term things, activities that you can do to help, boost your numbers temporarily. But if we're talking about real ROI, the things that happen through growth, adoption, retention, advocacy, those can't be sped up. And so when I talk with leadership, I help them understand here are the things that we can do short term that are activities. You're going to see pictures from events. You're going to see engagement numbers on dashboards. You're going to see short term changes in feature adoption. We're going to pair those with the more longitudinal results of ongoing retention, adoption, advocacy, awareness that we can directly and indirectly drive via community. So Anchoring to short-term wins is helpful. And then also showcasing here's the longer term, and being honest about how that compounds over time. I've often found in talking with other community builders, they're not really sure what story to tell when they're in
Mm.
a short-term ROI focused organization because they're getting pressure to show short-term results, but they're running a long-term program. And I don't know that there's a great win there because that's just not the nature of this work. You can still showcase short-term activity-based ROI, but I don't know that that's a winning long-term strategy.
So am I hearing it correctly that you kind of have to focus on the big bright goal and still celebrate the small wins during the journey?
It would be wise to do both because
Yeah.
you as a community builder, you have to hold both at the same time. Like long term, here are the big things that we're building towards. And there are many, many activities that we do along the way. Both need to be highlighted, celebrated, and reported on. Because if you don't, then you're focusing on the short term, which is kind of the inverse of community building. But if you only focus on the long term, no one internally is going to care. So you have to do both. There's a lot of this behind the scenes mental overhead that you have to do it as community builder that most other teams, for better or for worse, don't, because most are focused on shorter term activities and results. Our short term activities and results ladder up to these bigger, longer term things. Unfortunately, those are harder to see and less sexy. So we have
Mm.
to focus on
Yeah.
looking at both and often reporting and celebrating on the short term because that's what people internally typically understand. The other thing is just being honest, in a given organization, I can speak, tech world organizations, the typical tenure of most people working at companies is, 1 year, 3 year, maybe 5 years. So if you yourself are going to be someplace for 1 year or 3 years, you're going to want to show successes along the way. And so maybe you focus your effort on celebrating the short-term successes while also recognizing that you are building something that's longer term and enduring. Maybe you just talk about that less. But
Yeah.
the nature of the work, our work doesn't change because we are building relationships that scale over time. All those little activities ladder up to the bigger, longer term goal. It's just less sexy to people who are used to short term.
It's always nice to talk about wins, about something that's going right, about like the events that people come into, or some stories that people share about the product. But community is not always a bright side. It's also
Yeah.
a dark side. And I'm curious, how do you talk to leadership, to management about the challenges that you face in your community work?
I think openly, honestly, I, I'm not usually one to sugarcoat when there's challenges because all of us have challenges at work. And, in the nature of the work that we are doing as community builders, we're dealing with people. People are challenging
Yeah.
sometimes. Sometimes they're amazing and wonderful and awesome. Community isn't magic. I wish it was. It feels like magic when we do it well, but especially for our members, it can feel like magic. But the work behind the scenes is not magic. Building that participation takes work. Momentum is not guaranteed. ROI is not always linear. And so when I talk with leadership, I tell them about what's working and I talk about what isn't working. Even in my reporting that is free for anyone in an organization to read, I think it's okay to talk about here's what worked really well and here's what we're still experimenting with. And frankly, here's what fell flat and we're going to change. And so it's worth thinking through how you want to communicate about what trade-offs you made to achieve a specific program or result, what did or didn't scale or work as well as you thought that it might, what you're still iterating on. Oftentimes, especially in Silicon Valley, it's like fail fast. Like, okay, here's how we're trying things, and here's what worked, and here's what didn't, and here's how we're iterating it. I think also because of the timescales that community activities work on, it's worth noting to people when you're talking with leadership, especially, what's taking longer than you expected and why. Like what's changed? And sometimes it's things beyond your control. Oh, there was this product launch that was supposed to happen that we were planning all these activities around. Well, the product was delayed, and so were our activities. Like they need to understand how all these dots connect so that they can get the bigger picture and how all these pieces tie together. I found Some of this news is sometimes really easy to deliver because we're reporting something great. And when it's something more challenging, it's more difficult to talk about it. But that level of honesty and trust helps build credibility as for you as a leader
Yeah.
internally. Faking it, saying everything's great all the time, which, hey, if everything's great for you all the time in your community, please come talk to me because I'd love to learn exactly how that works. But in the reality of my experience, sometimes things go wrong. They go sideways. They don't work as well as you expected. Just be honest. If you feel like you're in a
Yeah.
safe environment to talk about that with your leader, which hopefully you are, if not, get a different job because that's bad. You should be able to talk about what's working and what isn't. And just like any program across any part of your organization with any stakeholder, they do things that work and they do some that don't. And if all of us were able to predict exactly how things would go, none of us would make any mistakes and it would be super amazing at work every day, and we could just turn it all over to the agents. And we're not there yet. Things go wrong, things go right. You have to be able to talk about both.
Yeah. What is your community tech stack looks like? I mean, what platforms and tools do you enjoy using the most, for what and why?
Yeah, so in the past, I mean, I've been in the industry for such a long time, like you name it, I've tried it at some point. Um, at Asana, we had a dozen, literally 1 dozen different tools in our tech stack thing because we had a very robust program that was global. We had multiple different event management tools and registration platforms. We had our own data warehouse. We had common room. We had activities that we would like challenges that we would issue via another tool. We had, of course, our forum. We had many different tools, which we then stitched together via Zapier, APIs, webhooks, and a lot of tiers. And then we had our own BI tool to help us
Mm.
make sense of what was going on. So that was probably the most robust and also brittle tech stack I've worked with, because when you have something that robust and you're connecting all these dots, when you make a change in one place or something breaks, there's all these downstream effects, and it, it was painful. Many points it was very painful. So I'm at Gradual now, so I'm a little bit biased, but the reason why I came to Gradual is because when I went from Asana to another company, I wanted to completely rethink my tech stack experience
Mm.
because I'm a believer of you should give people an array of experiences because not everyone wants to experience community in the same way. There will be people who want to attend events. There's others who want to read content. There's others who want to participate in forum discussions and many other things and everything in between.
Yeah.
So in order to do that, that's how I ended up with that Frankenstein's mess of tools at Asana. I didn't want to do that at my next company, so I actually brought in Gradual as my vendor of choice because it let me do all of the things, but in one
Mm.
place. And,
Yeah.
with fewer resources and as a smaller team, I still wanted to offer the array of experiences, but without the tech sprawl. And so that's what led me to using Gradual. And I was a very, very happy customer. So happy, in fact, that I ended up coming to work at the company. So I am a believer in it, but mostly because I was a user of it first. I think no matter what tech stack you are choosing as a community builder, I think you need to answer the questions of what surface areas do I want my members to be able to have experiences on? And then from there, what tool or tools will let me do that to the depth that I want? And I would encourage you to choose as few tools as possible to do that with as minimal custom build as possible. Because I've had the experience of having many tools, many of which needed custom builds, custom development, ops, access, and connect the dots behind the scenes. While you may get those resources initially to help you set those things up, you may not get the resources, the budget, or the time that you need to maintain them and grow them and adapt them over time. And everyone, especially if you're just starting out, everyone's really excited about the community program internally. Your leadership says, "Don't worry, we've got your back." Well, sometimes leaderships change. You get a different boss who may not believe in community as much, or maybe the awesome MOPS person that you were working with to help you build out your tool moves on to a different company. Then you are stuck. And I have become a much bigger proponent of fewer tools that let you do more things with less pain and fewer tears.
It's fun because sometimes when people are asking me, like, what is your community CRM? And I'm like, Google Sheets. And if I need some automation, I just use some custom macros that I can record or I can create code. And I don't really need to be a developer because I can go to ChatGPT, explain what I want to achieve, and then I just put this piece of code and put it in Google Sheets, and everything works, at least so far. And if, like I mentioned already, ChatGPT, so I'm curious, how do you use AI in your community building process?
Yeah, I think AI is amazing, and we have frankly yet to see all the things that we can do with it. What I will say is this, AI for me is the more technical side that helps complement the human side. Like
Hmm.
AI is used by me, and I think in community spaces, it's smart to use it to augment thinking, to automate repetitive tasks, but not to replace relationships. Because if you're thinking about using AI in the world of community, like the what we do is relationship building. And I've seen recently a lot of effort to think of like how do we automate community work via AI. It's like, well, maybe do a different kind of work if that's what you're trying to achieve, because part of why you want to do this is that human connection. And I don't think anyone is coming, I don't think our customers, our members are coming to community because they're looking for more AI. I think what they're looking for are relationships with real people or answers from real people. And so the way that I leverage AI in my work in the community that I'm building now is really helping me do my work better, like synthesizing community insights from across channels, like helping me identify patterns and questions or feedback or ways that people are leveraging content or not. I use it for a lot of internal things like drafting summaries. Like nobody cares if this was a well-crafted piece of prose. It's just a piece of information. And so I use it
Yeah.
for things like that, scaling content without losing the intent behind it or the energy behind it. So, like for me, AI is really about handling volume. I handle the judgment calls, I handle the trust, I handle the care with our members, I handle talking with them. But AI augments me. It's helpful for me as a tool, but it doesn't do my work for me.
Yeah, it's like automating your routine tasks so that you have more time to actually build relationships, not like doing this report summaries and stuff, because like, yeah, it's crazy. And
Yeah.
Josh, I wish to have the sky as a limit, but time is a limit to our conversation. So the final question, what is one thing to do right away for someone struggling with identifying their community ROI?
Yeah, I think the one thing that you can do if you really are having trouble figuring out your community ROI is pick one business question and answer it with community data. So that might be, do community members retain longer than non-members? Do they adopt your product or your service faster? Do they need less support? Are they at a higher revenue tier than non-community members? Like these are things that most people in your business will understand. And so oftentimes it's if you're just trying to find like one piece of ROI, show the difference, the delta between non-community members and community members through these different lenses. Different people at your company will care about different versions of this, but find one to start with because that can be the beginning of the story that you tell about how community impacts and matters more broadly than just how many people attended an event or how many people are in your forum. This is real ROI because these are things that the rest of the people in your business will care about.
And even one step back to your point, you have to have in your CRM the field where you click this person is community member, because I talked to so many businesses and I'm like, how do we understand if this person is a community member or not? Is it somehow marked in your CRM? And they're like, no, it doesn't, it's not marked and we can't do this. And I'm like,
That's
how
problem
can
number
we?
one.
Yeah, exactly. It's impossible to track those metrics if there is no way to distinguish like community members from not community members. So yeah, it's very important thing. And last but not least, name two people I should reach out to talk about community ROI.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting to talk to community and non-community people about community ROI. The first person I would talk to is Anthony DeShazer. He is an amazing revenue leader who really understands how community can help amplify and augment the sales motion. So community people, I know you're often afraid of salespeople, but you got to make friends with them because they're part of the reason why you're at the organization. So learn how to work with them because the two pieces coming together can be really amazing. Anthony DeShazer is a really amazing expert on that. The second person I would talk to is Bill Johnston. He is a super expert in the community space, built like the community at Autodesk, really long-term expert on community building and has consulted with many, many companies. He just has a very useful long-term perspective on where a community's been, how it can be built now, where it's going, and super tactical and practical.
Got it. And what is the best way to connect with you?
Oh, with me, it's really easy. I'm basically everywhere. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just look for Joshua Zerkel on LinkedIn. You can also follow me on Substack at the Community Code, which is where I write about community-led go-to-market. I also have a book that's coming out in the springtime, so please pick it up, help me out. And of course, I work at Gradual. Would love to have you check us out at gradual.com and join the Gradual community at community.gradual.com. I'd love your feedback as community builders because I'm designing it for you.
Josh, thank you so much, first of all, for all the things that you are doing for community industry, for building a tool for community builders, for sharing your experience. And you are a very easy person to talk to. And I learned so many things from, you basically fed my curiosity for during this conversation. Not all, of course, there are so many questions. I believe that at some point we'll have episode 2, but for
Please.
now, yeah, it was very, very helpful. So thank you so much for this conversation.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for listening and watching.
And yeah, see you in the community world. And thank you so much for listening. If you have any questions about how the community can help you reach and overcome your business goals faster, let's connect on LinkedIn and talk about it. That's it. We're done. See you in the next episode.